A widowed woman's car fails on a rainy night, and a small-town mechanic rushes to her rescue. He repairs her brakes for free. But when she glances at his battered toolbox, she spots something no one expected: a Bronze Star medal hidden among the wrenches. Why would a decorated soldier be working quietly in a rundown garage, raising his daughter alone? And why is the town suddenly turning against him, whispering that his medal might be fake? As rumors spread, code inspectors circle, and his very custody is threatened, the truth about his past and the town's dark secrets begin to surface. Can compassion and faith overcome lies and greed? Or will this single dad lose everything he's fought to protect? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm against the rain as Nora Whitcomb guided her old Buick down Maple Street. The choir's final hymn still echoed in her ears, something about grace and shelter, but the words felt hollow in the empty car. 23 years Ted had driven her home from Thursday practice, 6 months now of silence. She passed the yellow glow of Henderson's Diner, where Ted always stopped for pie after late council meetings. The turn signal clicked too loud in the quiet. At home, that cardboard box still sat on the hall table. Ted's army things. The funeral director had pressed it into her hands with that practiced sympathy, and she'd carried it inside and left it there, untouched. Like opening it would make everything final in a way the headstone hadn't. The light ahead turned amber. Nora pressed the brake. The pedal sank straight to the floor. Her stomach lurched. She pumped the pedal, nothing, just that sick, soft give of mechanical failure. The intersection rushed closer. A pickup truck waited in the cross street. No, no, no. She yanked the wheel right, tires shrieking. The Buick jumped the curb and bounced into a parking lot, still rolling fast. A sign flashed past. Max Motor, brake. The irony might have been funny if terror wasn't squeezing her chest. A figure burst from the garage bay, running straight at her car. Neutral, shift to neutral. The man's voice cut through rain and panic. Then parking, brake, gentle. Her hands shook, but she found the gear shift. The engine raced as she slipped it into neutral. The emergency brake grabbed, and the Buick jerked to a stop inches from a tool cabinet. The man appeared at her window, rain streaming off his ball cap. Dark eyes, calm behind wire-rimmed glasses. You hurt? No. The brakes just... Stay put a second. Let me look. He dropped to one knee beside the front wheel, pulled a flashlight from his pocket. The beam swept under the car. Rain darkened his work shirt, but he moved with the unhurried precision of someone who'd handled plenty of emergencies. Brake lines corroded through. He stood, wiping rain from his face. Lucky you made it here instead of that intersection. Nora's hand still trembled on the steering wheel. Can you fix it? Tonight? Sure. Got the parts. He opened her door, offered a hand. Come on inside where it's dry. This'll take maybe 40 minutes. The garage smelled of motor oil and coffee. A space heater glowed orange in the corner. Tool calendars and a child's drawings covered one wall. Crayon superheroes labeled Ordinary Heroes in careful kid handwriting. The mechanic rolled up his sleeves. I'm Marcus, Mac. Nora Whitcomb. He wheeled a jack under her car with practiced ease. That was good thinking with the emergency brake. Most folks freeze up. I grew up on a farm. Dad made us all learn crisis driving in the back 40. The memory surprised her. She hadn't thought about those lessons in years. Mac smiled, a quick flash that softened his serious face. Smart man. She watched him work, precise and methodical. No wasted motion. The way he handled tools reminded her of someone, but she couldn't place it. Thursday choir practice? He nodded at her folder of sheet music on the passenger seat. Every week for 15 years. My daughter loves when you all sing at the school assemblies, says Mrs. Whitcomb's choir sounds like angels. You have a daughter? Lila. She's 10. Probably doing homework in the office right now, actually. He gestured toward a door marked private. Single dad. The shop hours make it work. 20 minutes in, He slid out from under the car, fetched a brake line from a wall of parts. His toolbox sat open on the workbench, battered red metal with decades of wear. As he reached for a wrench, something caught the fluorescent light. A bronze star medal lay in the top tray, ribbon faded but the star itself polished bright. Nora's breath caught. She knew that medal. Not this specific one, but its twin sat in Ted's unopened box. Same ribbon, same quiet statement of extraordinary service. Mac followed her gaze, quickly flipped a shop rag over the medal. Sorry. Should keep that put away. My husband had one. The words tumbled out. Ted, he never talked about how he earned it. Mac's hands stilled on the wrench. They usually don't. He went back under the car, and Nora studied the garage walls. Safety certificates. A business license. A photo of a younger Mac in desert camo with other soldiers, all grinning despite the dust and exhaustion, no glory-seeking. Just simple evidence of a life lived in service. All set. Mac emerged, wiping his hands. Want to start her up? Test the pedal? The brake pedal felt firm, solid, safe. What do I owe you? He shook his head. Nothing. That's a $40 part at least plus labor. You don't owe me a thing, ma'am. He said it simple, final, reins letting up. You should get home safe now. Nora sat in her repaired car, engine running, staring at this man who'd just given 2 hours of his evening to a stranger. The bronze star in his toolbox kept close to his work, not displayed for admiration. Ted would have liked him. Thank you, she managed. Drive careful. As she pulled away, Nora glanced in the mirror. Max stood in the bay door, watching to make sure she made it to the street safely. Her heart still raced, but not from fear now. A decorated soldier, fixing cars in a small town, refusing payment from a widow with failed brakes. The question lodged in her chest like a prayer. What kind of man keeps his medal in a toolbox and his kindness ready for strangers? The apple pie cooled on Nora's counter while afternoon sun slanted through her kitchen window. She'd used Ted's recipe, the one he'd perfected during 30 years of church potlucks. Extra cinnamon, lattice crust, done proper. Her hands moved through the familiar motions, but her mind stayed on that bronze star in the toolbox. The drive to Mac's motor, APFAB brake, took 5 minutes. The shop doors stood open to catch the breeze. A radio played something soft, not quite gospel, not quite country, but somewhere between. The familiar smell of motor oil mixed with fresh coffee. Mrs. Whitcomb? Mac emerged from beneath a pickup truck on the lift, wrench in hand. Everything okay with the brakes? Perfect. She held out the pie tin. This is inadequate, thanks, but it's a start. His expression shifted surprise, then something guarded. You didn't need to. My husband always said never argue with a woman holding a pie. That earned a small smile. He set down the wrench, wiped his hands on a red shop rag. Well, can't argue with that logic. Dad, is that apple? A young voice piped up from the corner. Nora turned. A girl sat cross-legged on an overturned milk crate, math textbook spread across her knees. Dark curls pulled back in a ponytail, her father's serious eyes but with a spark of mischief. This is Lila. Mac's whole demeanor softened. Lila, this is Mrs. Whitcomb from last night. The lady with the bad brakes. Lila bounced up. Dad said you stayed super calm. Most people freak out. One guy last month cried, Lila, what? He did. She studied Nora with frank curiosity. Dad used to be in the army. Now he fixes cars to keep people safe. Same thing, different uniform. Mac's ears reddened. Homework, kiddo. Already finished. Mrs. Patterson barely gives us anything. Lila peered at the pie. Is that really apple? With extra cinnamon. Dad loves cinnamon. Does he now? Nora caught Mac's embarrassed look. Well, good thing I made plenty. Lila returned to her milk crate, but kept glancing over. Her notebook showed math problems in neat rows, margins decorated with tiny sketched figures, caped heroes changing tires, flying mechanics with wrenches. She's here most afternoons. Mac cleared space on the workbench for the pie. Single dad schedule, not ideal, but we make it work. Looks like you're doing fine to me. He shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. Her mom left when she was 3. Been just us since. He caught himself. Sorry. You didn't come here for life stories. Actually, that's exactly why I came. Nora kept her voice gentle. That medal in your toolbox, my Ted had one too. Never said how he earned it. Mac's jaw tightened slightly. Some stories aren't meant for telling. Dad saved people. Lila didn't look up from her notebook. A whole convoy. But he doesn't like talking about it because some of his friends didn't come home. Lila, enough. The shop fell quiet except for the radio's low hymn. Nora recognized the awkward silence of a man who'd learned to deflect gratitude like armor deflects bullets. A white city vehicle pulled into the lot, breaking the moment. A woman in a crisp button-down climbed out, clipboard in hand, expression all business. Mr. Alvarez. Mac's shoulders went rigid. Inspector Briggs. Routine compliance check. She didn't make it sound routine. Her eyes swept the bay with surgical precision. Several issues from last month remain unaddressed. I fixed the exit sign. Updated the extinguisher. The oil containment system still shows irregularities. She made notes without looking at him. The employee bathroom lacks proper ventilation. Your hazmat documentation is out of date. Each word landed like a blow. Nora watched Mac shrink into himself, the confident mechanic replaced by someone navigating a minefield. Briggs peeled a bright orange notice from her pad, walked past them to slap it on the front door. The sound echoed through the shop. 48 hours to correct all violations or face closure. She turned to leave, paused. And Mr. Alvarez? Having a child on premises during business hours raises liability concerns. You might want to arrange alternative care. Lila's pencil stopped moving. Briggs drove off, leaving exhaust and silence. Max stared at the orange notice like it might catch fire from shame alone. Dad? Lila's voice came out small. It's fine, baby. Just paperwork. But his hands shook as he pulled her into a hug. Why don't you grab a slice of Mrs. Whitcomb's pie? Take it to the office? Lila gathered her books, paused beside Nora. He always says it's fine, even when it's not. She disappeared through the door marked private. Max slumped against the workbench. 48 hours. Where am I supposed to find money for a new ventilation system? This feels targeted. He laughed, bitter and short. Welcome to Clive Harmon's Cedar Ridge. He wants this whole block for condos. Been squeezing us out one inspection at a time. Clive Harmon. The councilman? The very same. Nora thought of Clive's smooth smile at church, his big talk about revitalizing downtown. She hadn't considered what revitalizing meant for people like Mac. I should go. She touched his arm briefly. But this isn't over. Mrs. Whitcomb, Nora, and I mean it. Driving home, she caught glimpses of Lila's small wave in her rearview mirror. The girl stood at the office window, watching. That evening, Nora sat on her bed, Ted's memory box heavy in her lap. Army photos, medals, letters she'd never read. His voice echoed clear as Sunday bells. Help where you can, Nora. Especially when it's messy. That's when help matters most. She opened the box. Morning light caught the orange compliance notice like a beacon of shame. Mac had been under the hood of Mrs. Chen's Honda since 6, trying to squeeze in paying work before tackling the violations. Oil stained his knuckles as he torqued the last bolt, but his eyes kept drifting to that paper. The bell above the door chimed. Nora stepped through carrying a cardboard tray of coffee and a bakery bag that smelled of blueberry muffins. Thought you could use breakfast. Mac straightened too fast, bumped his head on the hood. Mrs. Whitcomb, Nora, you don't need to. Course I don't need to. She set the tray on his workbench, right where the pie had been yesterday. But Ted always said coffee tastes better when it's shared. He accepted the cup, grateful for something to do with his hands. Steam rose between them in the cool morning air. Started on the violations yet? Some. He gestured at fresh batteries in the smoke detectors, new tags on the fire extinguishers. The easy stuff. Nora walked to the door, studied the notice. Peeling paint in the employee restroom. Seriously? And missing OSHA posting from 2018. A ventilation report that expired last month. Mac's laugh held no humor. Funny thing is, Harmon's Country Club restaurant failed their health inspection 3 times last year. Still open. How do you know that? Public records. Started checking after my 3rd surprise inspection this year. He sipped his coffee, jaw tight. They've let worse slide for Harmon's people. Always have. Tell me about Harmon. Mac wiped his hands on a rag, choosing words carefully. Clive Harmon owns half the commercial property downtown, wants the other half. This whole block's been marked for luxury condos. They call it revitalization. And your shop? Prime corner lot. Been here since 1962. My landlord's father built it, but the old man's in a nursing home now, and his kids want to sell. Mac's voice dropped. Harmon's been squeezing us out, one code violation at a time. Can't force me out, but he can make staying impossible. Nora thought of Clive at last week's church social, his practiced smile and talk of progress. She'd even donated to his campaign once. That's not right. Lots of things aren't right. Mac gestured at the Honda. Mrs. Chen's fighting cancer. Needs her car to get to treatments. You think Harmon's luxury condo residents will care about that? The shop phone rang. Mac answered with his business voice, professional despite everything. While he scheduled an appointment, Nora noticed his toolbox still open on the workbench. The bronze star caught morning light, its ribbon faded but clean. Down the street, Ricky's diner buzzed with breakfast rush. A young man in a backward baseball cap scrolled his phone at the counter, waiting for takeout. Through the window he had a clear view of Mac's shop, could see straight to the workbench. He lifted his phone, zoomed in, snapped 3 quick photos. The metal gleamed in each one. By noon, the Cedar Ridge Community Facebook page had its newest post. Toolbox Valor? Or Stolen Valor? Saw this at that garage on 3rd. Anyone know if this guy actually served? Seems convenient. The first comment came within minutes. My dad earned his medals. Didn't keep them lying around like props. Then, typical, these people always claiming things that aren't theirs. A few defenders emerged. Mac fixed my brakes last winter. Good man. But the ugly responses multiplied faster. Should investigate. Stolen valor is a crime. And worse. Explains how certain people get advantages. Fake military service for sympathy. By 3 o'clock, the post had 47 comments and climbing. Mac didn't have Facebook, but Lila did, on the tablet she used for school. She saw it during lunch break, sitting in the corner of the shop with a peanut butter sandwich. Her face crumpled, then hardened into something too old for 10. Dad? Yeah, baby. She closed the tablet. Nothing. Just homework. But when 5:30 came and Mac flipped the sign to closed, she climbed into the truck without her usual chatter. They drove home through streets that suddenly felt less friendly. Mac's hands gripped the wheel tight at every intersection, wondering if the driver beside them had seen the post, believed it. Their apartment was a tidy 2-bedroom above the Korean grocery. Lila disappeared into her room. Mac heard her door click shut, a sound that might as well have been a thunderclap. He stood in the kitchen, staring at leftover spaghetti he couldn't bring himself to heat. Across town, Nora sat at her kitchen table with her phone, Pastor Ruth having just taught her to navigate Facebook after choir practice. The glow lit her face in the dark room. She'd found the post an hour ago and read every comment twice. Her hands trembled not with age, but with indignation that burned from chest to fingertips. She'd known Ted's medal was real because she'd been there when the Army presented it. She'd held him through nightmares about the men he couldn't save. These people throwing accusations around like gossip had no idea what service cost. She set the phone down, picked it up again, set it down harder. The memory box still sat open on her dresser upstairs. In it, among Ted's papers, was a letter about grateful civilians saved by a rescue convoy. She'd read it 3 times last night. The unit mentioned was the 3rd Infantry, 'Twan Brigade. She'd bet her pension that was Mac's unit, too. The brass hinges creaked when Nora lifted the lid. She'd avoided this box for 18 months, keeping it closed like she could keep David inside, preserved and perfect. But tonight, with rain tapping the windows and righteous anger still burning from that Facebook post, she needed his strength. David's bronze star sat in its velvet case, his purple heart beside it. Photographs tucked in manila envelopes, David young and lean in dress uniform, David gray-haired at his retirement ceremony. She touched each item like a rosary bead, remembering. At the bottom lay a folded letter, yellowed at the edges. She'd forgotten this one. It arrived weeks after David's first deployment ended. From a civilian aid worker whose convoy got ambushed outside Baghdad, "We'll never forget the soldiers who came for us. When our vehicles burned and we thought we'd die in that ditch, the 42nd Battalion appeared like angels. I must especially thank Sergeant Marcus Alvarez, who carried our injured translator 2 miles under fire, and Corporal David Whitcomb, who held the perimeter with 3 others while we evacuated." The paper shook. She read it again. Sergeant Marcus Alvarez. The same hands that carried a wounded translator yesterday stopped her car from careening into traffic. The same calm under fire that saved lives in Baghdad now fixed brake lines in Cedar Ridge. "David, did you know him?" Her whisper echoed in the empty bedroom. Outside, the rain intensified. She pressed the letter to her chest and cried for David, for Mac, for all the soldiers who came home to fight different battles. Morning came crisp and bright. Nora tucked the letter in her purse and drove to Mac's shop, arriving just as he raised the bay door. His face showed the exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept. "Morning, Mrs. Whitcomb." "Nora, please." She pulled out the letter. "I found this last night, in David's things." Mac wiped his hands on a rag, took the paper carefully. His eyes tracked down the page, stopped at his name. Something flickered across his face. Surprise. Maybe recognition, but he folded it and handed it back. "Small world. You saved those people. We all did. Your husband held the line. That's what mattered. But, Mrs. Whitcomb, I appreciate you sharing this, but I've got cars to fix." His voice stayed level, polite but final. "People need their vehicles." Before Nora could respond, Lila appeared from behind a Camry comic book in hand. She'd been drawing in her usual spot, listening to everything. "Was your husband a hero too?" The question hung between them. Nora saw Mac tense, ready to redirect his daughter, but she answered first. "Yes, he was." "Like my dad?" "Yes." Lila's face lit up. "I draw heroes. Want to see?" The comic pages showed ordinary people, a teacher staying late to tutor, a neighbor shoveling an elderly woman's walk, a father working under a car hood. Simple pencil sketches, but each one radiated care. "These are beautiful. Dad says real heroes don't wear capes. They wear work boots." Mac's phone buzzed on the workbench. He glanced at the screen, 17 missed calls. His expression darkened as he lifted it to his ear, checking voicemail. The first message was careful. "Mr. Alvarez, this is Channel 7 News. We'd like to discuss the allegations about your military service." The second, uglier, "Stolen valor is disgusting. You should be ashamed." The third made him grip the phone white-knuckled. "We know where you work. Better have proof, or—" He slammed the phone down hard enough to rattle tools. A wrench clattered to the floor. "Dad?" "It's nothing, baby." But Lila had gone pale. She'd seen the Facebook post at lunch yesterday, heard kids whispering. Now this. Mac's jaw worked. 23 years. 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. Shrapnel in my shoulder that still aches when it rains. His voice stayed low, controlled, but Nora heard the fracture underneath. "I fought for this country. bled for it. Now I have to prove it? He picked up the wrench, turned it over in his hands. You know what? Let them talk. I've got work to do. No. Both Mac and Leela looked at Nora. She stood straighter, chin lifted in a way that would have made David proud. No, you don't just let them talk. That's not how this works. Fire burned in her chest, spreading to her voice. Cowards hiding behind keyboards don't get to question your service. Not while I'm breathing. Mrs. Whitcomb, Nora. And I meant what I said. This doesn't stand. She looked at Lila, whose eyes had gone wide with hope. Then at Mac, who seemed caught between gratitude and wariness. You fixed my brakes for free. You served with my husband. You're raising this remarkable girl alone while keeping half the town's cars running. Her voice strengthened with each word. If they want proof of who you are, they'll get it. But not from you defending yourself. From this community defending you. Mac opened his mouth, closed it. Lila grabbed his hand. Outside, morning traffic picked up. Inside the shop, something shifted, an alliance forming, maybe a family too. Nora pulled out her phone, still awkward with the touchscreen but determined. First, I'm calling Pastor Ruth. Then Hank, he's retired sheriff, knows everyone. Then that young reporter Rhea. She looked up at Mac. You focus on the cars. Let me handle the people. For the first time since the notice appeared on his door, Mac's shoulders relaxed a fraction. This would not stand. Not on Nora Whitcomb's watch. The hardware store's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Nora pushed the cart down aisle 3. Mac walked beside her, list in hand, checking off items with the focus of someone planning a military operation. Fire extinguisher tags, safety yellow paint. New smoke detector batteries? The industrial paint's cheaper, he said, reaching for a can. Get the good stuff. It'll last longer. I can't let you pay for all this. You're not letting me do anything. I'm doing it. An older couple passed them, the woman leaning into her husband to whisper. Her eyes darted to Mac, then away. He kept his gaze forward, but Nora saw his grip tighten on the list. They turned into the next aisle. Earl Morrison stood examining drill bits, his John Deere cap pulled low. He'd brought his truck to Mac's shop just last month for transmission work. Earl? Mac nodded. Earl looked through him like he was made of glass and walked away. At the paint counter, they waited while Randy mixed their order. The shake of the machine filled the silence. Behind them, Nora heard it clearly, a man's voice. Not quite low enough. Faker. She spun around. A younger man in work boots studied a display of brushes with sudden intensity. Excuse me? He didn't look up. Wasn't talking to you, lady. No, you were talking about him. Like a coward. The man's face reddened. He muttered something about knowing real veterans and stalked off. Mac touched her elbow gently. Leave it. I will not. Please. His voice stayed steady, but she heard the effort it took. Let's just get what we need. At checkout, the teenage cashier rang them up without making eye contact. Her phone sat face up on the counter, the Facebook post visible on the screen. 63 new comments since morning. In the truck, Nora pulled out her phone and started taking screenshots. Each cruel comment, each accusation, each threat, she documented them all. Her fingers shook with anger as she scrolled. You don't need to read those, Mac said quietly. Evidence, for when we need it. He drove in silence, shoulders square, jaw set. A soldier's posture ready for incoming fire, but not firing back. That evening Mac's kitchen smelled like cumin and simmering beef. The small house felt lived in, comfortable despite its worn edges. Crayon drawings covered the refrigerator. A ceramic handprint, Lila, age 5, served as a paperweight on bills stacked neatly by the phone. Dad makes the best chili in Cedar Ridge, Lila announced, setting mismatched bowls on the table. Second best? Mac corrected. Mrs. Patterson at church has me beat. Only because she uses beer in hers, Lila stage whispered to Nora. Dad won't let me taste that one. The normalcy of it, the easy rhythm of father and daughter moving around each other, the gentle teasing. The warmth made Nora's chest ache. in a way that wasn't entirely grief. She hadn't sat at a family table like this since David died. "Tell Nora about your new comic," Mac prompted, ladling chili. Lila's eyes lit up. "It's about mechanics who are secret superheroes. Their capes are made from shop rags, and they can hear when cars are about to break down." "What are their powers?" "They can fix anything with just a wrench and determination." Lila grinned. "And they never charge old people or single moms." Mac coughed, color rising in his cheeks. "Eat your cornbread." "Do they fight villains?" Nora asked. "Sort of. There's this bad guy who wants to tear down their secret base to build a fancy tower. But the heroes stop him by fixing everyone's cars so well that the whole town protects them." The parallels weren't subtle. Nora caught Mac's eye. He shrugged, half embarrassed, half proud. "I think that would make a wonderful comic book." "Really?" "Dad says I spend too much time drawing." "I said you need to finish homework first," Mac corrected. "Art's important too." They ate and talked, conversation flowing easier with each passing minute. Lila shared school gossip. Mac told a story about a customer who'd tried to pay him in chickens. For the first time since David's funeral, Nora laughed, really laughed, the kind that made her sides hurt and tears spring to her eyes. "I haven't heard you laugh like that," Mac said softly. "I haven't had reason to." Their eyes met across the table. Something unspoken passed between them, understanding, maybe. Recognition of shared loss and unexpected connection. The kitchen clock chimed 8. Mac's expression shifted, worry creeping back in. "Inspector comes at 9 tomorrow. We'll be ready. Even if we pass, it won't stop Harmon. Or the rumors. One battle at a time." Lila disappeared to her room and returned with a folded paper. She pressed it into Nora's hands shyly. "I made this today." The drawing showed a cartoon mechanic with tools for hands, stopping a runaway car while its driver, an older woman with Nora's silver hair, watched in relief. At the bottom, in careful letters, "Heroes don't need capes. It's beautiful. You can keep it. For when you feel scared." Nora's throat tightened. "Thank you, sweetheart." At the door, Mac walked her to her car. The night air bit cold, winter approaching fast. "Thank you, for today, for standing by us. That's what friends do. Is that what we are? Friends?" She considered the question, thought of his quiet strength, Lila's bright spirit, the empty chair at her own table. "I think we might be." He smiled a real smile, not the polite one he wore for customers. "Drive safe, Nora." At home, she pinned Lila's drawing to her refrigerator. Tomorrow would bring the inspector, more whispers, more fights. But tonight, she'd laughed at a kitchen table. Tonight, she felt less alone. The comic mechanic stood guard on her fridge, protecting her from runaway fears. Morning sunlight slanted through the garage bay doors, turning dust motes into floating gold. Dee Briggs arrived at 9 sharp, clipboard clutched like a weapon. Her sedan parked at an angle that blocked customer access. Deliberate, Nora thought. Max stood ready. Fresh white paint covered the walls. New extinguishers gleamed red in their brackets. Every paper filed, every receipt in order. He'd worked through the night. Nora could see it in the shadows beneath his eyes. Dee walked the perimeter slowly, running her finger along window frames, checking dates on inspection tags. She frowned at the new paint. "Still wet, that's a ventilation concern." "Windows are open," Max said evenly. "Fans running." She scribbled on her clipboard, checked the bathroom. Scribbled more. Examined the tire disposal area, the oil recycling drums, the tool storage. Each inspection followed by that scratching pen. "Your business license renewal, filed yesterday." Carbon copies on the desk. The zoning variance for customer parking, approved in 2018, never expired. For every challenge, Mac had an answer. Nora watched from the corner, pride swelling at his preparedness. But Dee's frown only deepened. "These are preliminary observations. Further inspections are pending." "Pending until when?" "Until the department determines full compliance." Which meant never, Nora realized. They'd drag this out until Mac broke or gave up. A black Lexus pulled up, purring expensive. Clive Harmon emerged, silver hair catching the light, smile practiced as a politician's handshake. His shoes clicked against the concrete Italian leather meeting honest American cement. "Morning, D. Just checking on our neighborhood improvement initiatives." His eyes swept the shop with the calculating gaze of a developer already measuring for condos. When they landed on Nora, his smile tightened. "Mrs. Whitcomb, didn't expect to see you here. My car gets serviced here." "Ah. Well, you might want to find a new mechanic. Changes are coming to this corner." He extended his hand to Mac, who took it after a pause. Clive's grip looked firm enough to hurt, but Mac didn't flinch. "Mr. Alvarez, heard there's been some questions about your service record." "No questions from anyone who matters. Public perception matters, especially in business." Clive's smile could cut glass. "This corner won't be a garage forever. Cedar Ridge is growing. We need to grow with it. Some folks can't afford growth. Progress doesn't wait for stragglers." The word hung in the air like a slap. Mac's jaw clenched, but he stayed silent. Clive adjusted his cufflinks gold, naturally, and nodded to D. "Keep up the diligent work. We want everything properly documented." They left together, D trailing behind like a kicked dog following its master. The moment their cars disappeared, Mac slammed the bay door hard enough to rattle tools on the wall. "They won't stop until they take everything." His voice cracked on the last word. Not just the shop, his livelihood, his dignity. Maybe even Lila, if someone decided a struggling mechanic couldn't provide proper care. Nora's phone buzzed. "Pastor Ruth, saw the posts. Come see me tonight. Ruth wants to see me. Tell her not to get involved. This is my fight." "No, it's not." He turned to her, something raw in his expression. "You don't understand. Men like Harmon, they've got the whole system. The permits, the lawyers, the social media mob. Fighting back just makes it worse. So you just take it? I survive it. For Lila. What lesson does that teach her? That bullies win if they're rich enough?" The question landed hard. Max slumped against the workbench, suddenly looking older than his years. "What else can I do? Let people help." "Let me help. You've done enough. I've barely started." Outside, a customer pulled up, saw the inspection notice still taped to the window, and drove away. Another loss, another victory for Harmon's patient siege. Nora stayed until afternoon, helping organize receipts and answer phone calls from confused customers. Half asked about the Facebook rumors. She told them all the same thing: come see for yourself. Judge the man by his work, not gossip. Few said they would. As shadows lengthened toward evening, Nora walked home through downtown Cedar Ridge. Empty storefronts lined Main Street like missing teeth in a smile. Harmon's promise of growth looked more like controlled decay, clearing out the undesirable to make room for the profitable. She passed the old barber shop where black families had gathered for generations, closed now, windows soaped. The Mexican bakery shuttered after a fire the insurance wouldn't cover. The pattern was clear once you looked. Harmon wasn't just taking Mac's shop, he was erasing entire communities, replacing them with something shiny and hollow. At the corner of Maple and 3rd, she stopped. The old Presbyterian church rose before her, steeple piercing the sunset sky. Her lips moved in silent prayer. "Lord, show me the way. Give me wisdom. Give me courage. Help me fight for what's right, even if I fight alone." The wind picked up, setting leaves dancing around her feet. Somewhere, a dog barked. Somewhere, a child laughed. Cedar Ridge still had life in it, still had heart. But hearts could stop without warning. She'd learned that when David died, unless someone kept them beating, unless someone fixed what was broken. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of justice deferred. Tomorrow would bring new battles. Tonight, she'd plan with Pastor Ruth. The fight was no longer about one mechanic's honor. It was about truth versus lies, justice versus greed, community versus profit. It was about keeping Cedar Ridge's heart alive. Steam rose from Pastor Ruth's coffee mug like incense in the fellowship hall. The morning light slanted through stained glass, painting red and gold patches across the worn linoleum. She sat across from Nora at a folding table scarred by decades of potlucks and bingo nights. Dee Briggs came after him with that clipboard like it was a weapon. Dee's lost her way. But we're not talking about Dee. Ruth's voice carried the authority of someone who'd counseled 3 generations through divorce, death, and despair. We're talking about that good man and how we're going to help him. He doesn't want help. Pride's a luxury he can't afford. Neither can we. Ruth pulled out her phone, a smartphone Nora had helped her learn, and scrolled through the Facebook posts. Look at this poison. Anonymous cowards spreading lies about a man who served his country. Makes my blood boil. Mine too. Good. Anger's useful when it's righteous. Ruth set the phone down. But we need to be smart. Can't fight shadows with shadows. What do you suggest? Ruth's eyes sparked with something Nora recognized, the same look she got before reorganizing the entire church basement or launching a food drive that fed half the county. We bring light. Lots of it. She explained her vision. A community service event at Mac's garage. Call it Blessing Breaks Day. Free brake checks for seniors, maybe an oil change or 2. Frame it as ministry, not protest. Let people see Mac working, serving, being exactly who he is. The Pharisees can't argue with good works. Clive Harmon isn't a Pharisee, he's worse. Even the devil can't stand against a community united in love. They spent the morning planning. Ruth called the church volunteers the quilting circle, the men's breakfast group, the youth choir. Nora designed flyers on the church computer, printing them on goldenrod paper that caught the eye. By Thursday, word had spread through the senior center, the VFW hall, and every church in town. Saturday morning arrived crisp and bright, autumn air sharp enough to wake the dead. Nora arrived at 6:30 to find Mac already there, staring at the setup in disbelief. The churchmen had erected 2 canvas tents. The quilting ladies arranged folding chairs and a coffee station. Someone had strung lights between the lampposts, not Christmas lights, just simple white bulbs that turned the lot into something festive. What is all this? Community. His eyes glistened. I can't pay for. Nobody's asking you to. Cars started arriving by 7. First came Ethel Morrison in her '92 Mercury, practically held together by rust and prayer. Then Walter Chen in his pickup, American flag decal peeling on the back window. Soon the line stretched down Main Street. Mac's veteran buddies showed up without being asked. Jorge from the VFW, Big Tommy who ran the hardware store, Silent Pete who hadn't been the same since Afghanistan but could diagnose an engine by sound alone. They rolled under cars, checked brake pads, topped off fluids. No charge, no questions, just neighbors helping neighbors. Lila darted between vehicles, handing out her comic pages. She'd drawn dozens mechanics with capes, soldiers becoming teachers, mothers lifting cars to save children. Each one signed with her careful cursive. Ordinary Heroes by Lila A. This one's my favorite. She showed Nora a drawing of a librarian fighting a dragon made of lies with a sword made of books. Is that supposed to be me? Maybe. The girl's smile could power the whole town. The quilting ladies served coffee and homemade donuts. Ruth moved through the crowd like a shepherd, knowing everyone's name, their grandchildren, their troubles. She prayed with Mrs. Garcia about her husband's chemo. She listened to Jim Bradley's fears about losing the farm. By noon, they'd checked 43 vehicles, fixed 17 brake issues that could have caused accidents. Saved lives, probably, though nobody kept that kind of score. The choir members started it, Agnes Washington humming Amazing Grace while waiting for her Oldsmobile. Others joined in, harmonies building like something organic, something that grew from the soil of shared purpose. Soon dozens of voices rose together, the hymn floating over Cedar Ridge like a benediction. Mac stood in the middle of it all, wrench in hand, oil staining his coveralls. tears tracking clean lines through the grime on his face. Jorge slapped his shoulder. Big Tommy nodded. Silent Pete actually smiled. Cars lined Main Street, headlights on despite the daylight, someone's idea that spread without words. The lights glowed like votive candles, like prayers made visible, like hope refusing to be extinguished. Clive Harmon drove by twice, slowing each time, face dark behind his tinted windows. Let him look. Let him see what community really meant. As the last car pulled away, Mrs. Foster's ancient Corolla now stopping smooth as silk, the volunteers began cleaning up, but nobody rushed. They lingered, reluctant to let the magic dissolve. Mac approached Nora, struggling for words. She saw the war in his face, gratitude wrestling with pride, hope fighting habit. This was, I don't know how to. You don't have to. Why? Why do all this for me? Not just for you, for all of us, for Lila, for the town. She looked around at the people folding chairs, collecting trash, still humming hymn fragments. We need you, Mac. Cedar Ridge needs places like this, people like you. His voice came out rough. I'm just a mechanic. No. You're a man who fixes things that are broken, who serves without counting the cost, who shows up when it matters. She gestured at the empty lot where hours before a community had gathered. That's heroism, the real kind. He turned away, overwhelmed. Lila ran up and grabbed his hand, then reached for Nora's too. They stood there, the three of them, connected by a child's simple gesture. See, Nora whispered, you're not alone. The lights still glowed along Main Street. Somewhere, a church bell tolled the hour. And in that moment, despite Harmon's schemes and Facebook's poison, Cedar Ridge felt whole. The notification pinged on Nora's phone at 6:30 Sunday morning. Rhea Patel had published her story. The headline filled the screen, "The Veteran Keeping Cedar Ridge Safe One Break Line at a Time." Below it, a photo of Mac under a car during Blessing Breaks Day, his bronze star visible in the open toolbox beside him. Nora read it twice, then 3 times. Rhea had captured everything: the free repair that started it all, the harassment campaign, the community response. She'd interviewed seniors whose cars Mac had fixed over the years, never charging those who couldn't afford it. She'd found veterans who'd served with him, confirming his service record with dates and places. She'd even tracked down the chaplain who'd recommended him for the Bronze Star. The story spread like wildfire through Cedar Ridge's digital networks. Shares climbed from dozens to hundreds. Comments poured in, not the ugly whispers from before, but testimonies. People remembering kindnesses, fixed cars, refused payments. By noon, Rhea called Nora directly. The donation link has raised $3,000. People from 3 counties over are contributing. Does Mac know? I thought you should tell him. Nora drove to the shop, finding Mac elbow deep in an engine. Sunday was supposed to be his day off. But here he was, fixing Widow Patterson's sedan because she needed it for her husband's dialysis Monday morning. You need to see this. He wiped his hands on a rag, squinting at her phone screen. His face cycled through emotions: surprise, discomfort, something that might have been hope. I didn't ask for this. Nobody's saying you did. The donations kept climbing. 4,000. 5. Someone had started a hashtag, Breaks for Good. Photos appeared of other mechanics offering free safety checks inspired by the story. Jorge arrived, carrying a manila envelope. Found this under your door. Inside, a crisp $500 bill. No note, no name, just grace, anonymous and stunning. Max stared at it like it might bite. I can't. You can and you will. Nora's voice brooked no argument. It's not charity, Mac. It's recognition. It's people saying they see you, they value what you do. But it's grace, Mac. Accept it. He held the bill with trembling fingers. Jorge squeezed his shoulder and left without words. Sometimes men communicated better in silence. That evening, Nora appeared at Mac's door with a casserole dish. Figured you forgot to eat again. How did you? Lila texted me. She's worried you're living on coffee and beef jerky." The girl appeared behind her father, already reaching for the dish. "Is that your famous chicken and rice?" "With extra cheese. Just how you like it." They ate at the small kitchen table, its surface scarred from years of homework and hasty meals. The casserole steamed between them, comfort food in its truest form. Lila chattered about school, a science project on hydraulics inspired by watching her dad work. Mac listened with quiet attention, occasionally meeting Nora's eyes with something like wonder. "Mrs. Nora?" Lila pushed her empty plate aside. "Could you help me organize my comics? Like a real library? You want to catalog them? With numbers and everything. Dad says I have over 100 now." They moved to the living room, where Lila hauled out 3 shoeboxes stuffed with drawings. Heroes in every form: teachers, nurses, garbage collectors, crossing guards, each drawn with careful detail, stories told in panels and word bubbles. "We'll need a system." Nora settled on the floor, spreading comics across the carpet. "How about by date first, then subject? Can we make labels?" "Of course. Every good collection needs labels." They worked for an hour, Nora teaching Lila about archival order, about preserving important documents. The girl absorbed it all with fierce concentration, her father's focus reflected in miniature. Mac watched from the doorway, coffee mug forgotten in his hands. These two people, this woman who'd appeared in his life through a brake failure, his daughter who drew hope with colored pencils, they were rebuilding something in him he'd thought permanently broken. "Dad, look." Lila held up a labeled divider. "Mrs. Nora showed me how to make categories. This one's for military heroes. This one's for everyday heroes. And this one's for heroes who fix things." "That last one's the biggest stack," Nora observed, "because fixing things is the best kind of hero." The evening wound down gently. Lila yawned over her newly organized collection. Mac carried her to bed, returning to find Nora washing dishes despite his protests. "You don't have to." "I know. I want to." They stood side by side at the sink, her washing, him drying, falling into rhythm without discussion. Outside, crickets announced the approaching night. Inside, something precious and fragile bloomed in the quiet. "I should go." Nora dried her hands, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment. "Let me walk you out." The night sky spread above them, stars visible despite the streetlights. Her Buick waited in the drive, brake lines solid, stopping power assured. "Thank you." His voice came soft in the darkness. "For today. For the article. For—" He gestured at the house, where Lila's light had just clicked off. "For seeing us. Thank you for letting yourself be seen." They stood there, two people who'd known loss, who'd built walls, who were slowly learning to hope again. Not rushing anything, not needing to, just standing under stars that had witnessed harder times and would witness better ones. "Same time next Sunday?" Nora asked. "For casserole?" "We'd like that." She drove home with her radio off, savoring the quiet, the sense of something beginning. In her rearview mirror, Mac's porch light glowed steady and sure. 2 days passed in deceptive calm before Dee Briggs returned. This time, she wasn't alone. Clive Harmon stood behind her, polished shoes gleaming against the oil-stained concrete. His smile could have curdled milk. "Mr. Alvarez." Dee held out a document like a weapon. "Stop work order, effective immediately." Mac set down his wrench with deliberate care. "On what grounds?" "Saturday's event. You operated a community gathering without proper permits." "It was free service. No money changed hands." "Irrelevant." Clive stepped forward, his voice silk over steel. "You hosted over 50 vehicles on commercial property. That requires a community event permit, liability waivers, traffic management plans." Nora emerged from the office where she'd been organizing receipts. "You never required permits when Harmon Auto did their annual car show." "Different circumstances." Clive didn't even look at her. "Different ownership, you mean?" Now he turned, eyes cold. Mrs. Whitcomb, isn't it? Perhaps you should focus on your own affairs. Dee taped the orange notice to the bay door, right over the spot where the last one had been. All work stops now. Any violation will result in immediate license revocation. Mac's hands clenched, unclenched. The tendons in his neck stood out like cables, but he held his tongue, that military discipline keeping him steady when lesser men would have exploded. His phone rang, shrill in the tense silence. "Mr. Alvarez? This is Principal Morrison at Cedar Ridge Elementary. We need you here immediately. It concerns Lila." The blood drained from Mac's face. "Is she hurt?" "She's fine, but—" Child Services received a complaint. "They're here now." The phone slipped from Mac's fingers. Nora caught it, heard the principal still talking about standard procedures and nothing to worry about, but, "We're coming." She ended the call, grabbed her purse. "I'm driving." Mac moved like a man underwater, fumbling for his keys, forgetting he didn't need them. Behind them, Clive's satisfied chuckle followed them to Nora's car. The drive took 7 minutes. Felt like 7 hours. Mac sat rigid, staring straight ahead, lips moving in what might have been prayer or curse. "She's fine," Nora said. "You heard him. She's fine. Someone called Child Services on my daughter. We'll handle it. They think I'm unfit. They think—" His voice cracked. "What if they take her?" "They won't. You don't know that. She didn't. Couldn't." But she reached over, squeezed his hand once, firm and sure. "I know you. That's enough." The principal's office smelled of coffee and anxiety. Lila sat in a plastic chair, legs swinging, trying to look brave. A woman in a gray suit sat across from her, clipboard balanced on her knee. "Daddy?" Lila's voice came small. Mac crossed to her in 2 strides, knelt, pulled her close. "Hey, baby girl. Everything's okay." They kept asking about the shop, about chemicals. "Mr. Alvarez." The social worker stood, professional smile fixed in place. "I'm Jennifer Crenshaw from Child Protective Services. We received a complaint about unsafe conditions. My daughter has never been unsupervised around chemicals. Ever. I understand. We just need to ask some questions, verify the home environment. The home environment is fine. I'm sure it is. This is just procedure. Procedure, rules, regulations. All the weapons small people used when they couldn't fight fair." The questions came rapid fire. "Did Lila spend time at the garage?" "Yes." "Doing homework in the office?" "Was she exposed to fumes?" "No. The office had separate ventilation." "Did she help with repairs?" "Never. She knew the rules." Lila answered clearly, that bright intelligence shining through. "My dad keeps me safe. He always has." An hour of interrogation disguised as concern. Mac answered every question with military precision, but Nora saw the cost. Each word extracted something from him, dignity stripped away piece by piece. Finally, mercifully, it ended. "Everything seems in order," Ms. Crenshaw announced, as if she were doing them a favor. "We'll close the case." "This time," Mac said quietly. "Pardon?" "You'll close it this time, until the next anonymous call." The social worker's smile faltered. "Mr. Alvarez, we take all complaints seriously. Some more seriously than others." They left with Lila between them, her small hand in each of theirs. She chattered about school, about her teacher saying her hydraulics project was the best in class. Normal things, safe things, trying to make the world right again through will alone. Mac closed the shop early, pulling bay doors down with finality. At home, he moved through evening routines like a ghost. Dinner, homework, bath time, story, mechanical, precise, empty. After Lila fell asleep, he stood in his bedroom, pulled the bronze star from its place in the toolbox, stared at it for a long moment, then shoved it deep in a dresser drawer, under old shirts and forgotten paperwork. It only brings trouble. Nora watched from the doorway. Her heart ached with helpless frustration. This good man, This quiet hero, reduced to hiding his honor like contraband. Later she found him sitting on Lila's bed, watching her sleep. In the nightlight's glow, his face showed every one of his 52 years. "I can't lose you," he whispered to the sleeping child. "You're all I have left." The hammer strikes echoed down Main Street like a funeral drum. Each blow drove another nail through plywood and into Mac's pride. Morning sun caught the fresh boards he'd hauled from his own garage, turning them gold against the shop's weathered brick. "That's the last one." He stepped back, surveyed his work. The windows that had welcomed customers for 15 years now stared blind at the street. Nora's Buick pulled up, tires crunching gravel. She emerged carrying a basket, the scent of orange and cranberry trailing behind her. Fresh scones, still warm. Mac. She stopped, seeing the boarded windows. "What are you doing?" "What I have to." He set the hammer on his workbench, wouldn't meet her eyes. "You're not giving up. I'm protecting what matters." He glanced toward the office where Lila's backpack sat, ready for school. "They want to fight? Fine. But not with her in the crossfire. We can beat this. The whole church is ready to." "No." The word came sharp, harder than he'd intended. She flinched. "Nora, I appreciate everything. I do. But you need to stop coming here." "Excuse me? Your help is making things worse." "That social worker, the inspector. Clive, they're targeting me because you've made this into some crusade." She set the basket down carefully, as if sudden movements might shatter something. "I made this into a crusade? They're destroying you because Clive wants your land. And you turned it into a story." Drew attention. "Now my daughter's paying for it. That's not fair." "Fair?" He laughed, bitter as old coffee. "When has anything been fair? I kept my head down for 10 years, fixed cars, raised my girl, stayed quiet. Then you show up with your good intentions, and suddenly I'm defending my service record and fighting for custody." The words landed like blows. Nora's hands trembled. "I was trying to help. I didn't ask for help." His voice rose, years of swallowed pride spilling out. "I can fight my own battles. Been doing it since before you knew my name. Mac, please, just go." She picked up her basket, scones untouched. At her car, she turned back once. He'd already disappeared inside, pulling the door shut behind him. The church sanctuary stood empty, morning light streaming through stained glass. Nora sank into a pew, basket beside her, and let the tears come. Pastor Ruth found her there 20 minutes later, arranging hymnals for evening service. Heard hammering down the street. Ruth settled beside her, solid and warm. "Mac's boarding up?" "He asked me not to come back." He thinks I made it worse. Maybe I did." Ruth continued placing hymnals, methodical and calm. "You know what I love about Peter in the Bible?" "What?" "Man jumped out of a perfectly good boat to walk on water, sank like a stone, of course, but he jumped. Most folks would have sat there, safe and dry, watching Jesus from a distance. Peter had faith. Peter had fear too. Difference was, he used it to move forward instead of backward." Nora wiped her eyes. "Mac doesn't want my help. Mac doesn't want pity. There's a difference." Ruth aligned another hymnal, precise. "Pride's a funny thing. Makes a man board up windows rather than accept grace. Makes him push away the very people God sends to stand beside him. So what do I do? What faith does. Walk on sore feet beside friends, even when they push you away." Ruth stood, knees creaking. "That man's been fighting alone so long he's forgotten what backup looks like." "Doesn't mean he doesn't need it." He was so angry. "Anger's just fear in work clothes. What's he afraid of?" Nora thought of Lila's frightened face in the principal's office, Mac's hands shaking as he'd held her. "Losing everything. Then show him he won't. Not on your watch." That night, Nora sat at her kitchen table, the memory box open before her. David's letter lay flat under the lamp, his careful handwriting still clear after all these years. She traced the words with her finger. Sergeant Marcus Alvarez, 42nd Battalion. Her husband had written about the convoy, about the ambush, about the sergeant who'd pulled 3 civilians from a burning vehicle while under fire. "Never left anyone behind," David wrote, "even when it would have been safer to run." She underlined the passage, then looked at David's photo propped against the salt shaker. His kind eyes seemed to encourage her. "He's stubborn," she told the photo. "Proud, hurt, silence. He's also alone. And scared. More silence, but warmer somehow. You would have liked him, would have understood him." She folded the letter carefully, returned it to the box. Tomorrow she'd start making calls. The base museum, the Veterans Administration, anyone who might have records. Mac could push her away, but she wouldn't go far. Standing in her doorway, looking out at the star-filled sky, she made a promise to both the living and the dead. "I will not let them erase you, Marcus." The words carried on the night wind, past darkened shops and boarded windows, past hurt and pride, towards something that might yet be hope. The interstate stretched gray and endless. Pastor Ruth's ancient Oldsmobile, eating miles with surprising smoothness. Nora rode shotgun, map spread across her lap despite the GPS. Ruth refused to trust. Hank Perdue filled the back seat, his Vietnam veteran cap pulled low. "Take the next exit," Nora said. "Fort Harrison's about 3 miles east." "Know this base," Hank muttered. "Did some reserve training here in '78. Ruth navigated the exit, past truck stops and cornfields. The base appeared like a small city, guard towers and chain link announcing a different world. At the visitor center, they signed forms and received passes, then followed directions to the base museum. The building smelled of floor wax and old uniforms. Display cases held helmets, medals, photographs of young faces frozen in time. A docent directed them to the research wing, where Chaplain Arthur Mills waited in a small office lined with binders. He looked every one of his 78 years, white hair, bent shoulders, hands that shook slightly as he poured coffee from a thermos. "You're asking about Marcus Alvarez?" His voice carried the rasp of age. "Sergeant Alvarez, 42nd Battalion? You remember him?" Nora leaned forward. "Remember?" Mills smiled, revealing coffee-stained teeth. "Son, you don't forget the ones who run toward fire instead of away. Especially when they're dragging civilians out of it." He pulled a binder from the shelf, pages protected in plastic sleeves. October 2003. Convoy hit outside Ballad. IED first, then small arms fire. 3 civilian vehicles caught in the crossfire, contractors, interpreters, a couple of journalists. His finger traced down a typed report. Mac's squad was rear security, could have stayed put, returned fire from cover. Instead, he took 2 men and went forward, pulled 7 people out while taking fire. One of them was a kid, maybe 12. Translator's son. "You were there?" Came in with the QRF Quick Reaction Force. By the time we arrived, Mac had the civilians behind concrete barriers, was treating wounds with his squad's medical supplies. Mills turned the page, revealing a photograph. Young Mac, face streaked with dust and blood, kneeling beside wounded civilians. Lost one of his men that day. Specialist Torres. Mac carried his body back himself. Ruth reached across the table, touched the photo gently. "And the Bronze Star?" Mills straightened, memory sharpening. "Pinned it myself. Division ceremony, 2 months later. My hands shook so bad I stuck him with the pin." He just smiled, said medals didn't bring Torres back. He looked at each of them. "Why are you asking? Mac in some kind of trouble?" "Someone's questioning his service," Nora said quietly, "calling it stolen valor." The chaplain's face darkened. "That's a damn lie." "Pardon my language." He stood, knees protesting, and went to a filing cabinet. After some searching, he produced a manila folder. Copy of the citation. Originals in his service record, but I kept copies of all my soldiers' commendations. He handed it to Nora, then sat heavily, pulling out a legal pad. "You want a sworn statement? I'll write it now. Anyone says Marcus Alvarez didn't earn that star can answer to me. While Mills wrote, Hank studied the convoy report, says here 3 civilian vehicles, lists the occupants contractors from Harmon Industries. Nora's head snapped up. Harmon? Right here. Hank tapped the page. William Harmon, senior project manager, 2 other employees. Clive's father, Ruth breathed. Has to be. Mills looked up from his writing. Harmon? Yeah, I remember him. Older fellow, kept talking about his son back home, how proud he was. Mac probably saved his life. They drove back mostly in silence, the weight of truth heavy in the car. Nora's phone buzzed text from Rhea. Found something. William Harmon, died 2018. Obituary mentions Iraq convoy incident 2003, saved by unnamed soldiers, pulling more records. Another text followed. Clive knew, has to have known. As they entered Cedar Ridge, Nora noticed changes. Fresh graffiti on Mac's boarded windows. Hero in red spray paint. Someone had left flowers by the door. That evening, Nora sat in her kitchen. Chaplain Mills's statement and the citation copy spread before her. She dialed Mac's number, half expecting voicemail. He answered on the 3rd ring. Nora, we found him. Chaplain Mills. He remembers everything. Breathing on the other end, slow and measured, he wrote a statement. Has a copy of your citation. Photos from that day. Okay. Mac, there's more. The convoy you saved Clive Harmon's father was in it. Long silence. Then, I know. You knew? Recognized the name when he got elected. Figured he didn't need reminding his old man, once begged a black sergeant to save him. Why didn't you say anything? Would it have mattered? Men like Clive, they reshape truth to fit their world. His daddy owing me his life? That's not a truth he'd accept. But it's leverage. It's the past. I've got enough battles in the present. She heard Lila's voice in the background, asking about dinner. Mac's tone softened, answering her, then returned to the phone. Why are you doing all this for me? Nora looked at David's photo, at the chaplain's statement, at the truth laid out in black and white, because you did it first for people you didn't even know. Silence stretched between them, but it felt different now. Warmer, like morning sun breaking through boarded windows. Thank you, he said finally. We're not done fighting. I know. A pause. Maybe I don't have to fight alone. After they hung up, Nora sat in her kitchen's gentle light, feeling something shift. Not victory yet, but movement. Like ice, beginning its slow surrender to spring. 2 nights later, headlights cut through Cedar Ridge's darkness like prayers made visible. One by one, cars pulled along the curb outside Mac's shuttered garage, their beams painting golden stripes across boarded windows. Pastor Ruth stood in the center of the lot, her wool coat buttoned against the November cold, directing traffic with the practiced ease of someone who'd organized 100 church potlucks. Pull up close. Harold. That's it. Leave your lights on. The crowd gathered slowly. Seniors climbed from Buicks and Toyotas, hands cupping flickering candles against the wind. Younger families joined them, children clutching their grandparents' sleeves. Even folks who hadn't set foot in church for years appeared, drawn by something harder to name than curiosity. Ruth raised her voice, not shouting, just carrying. We're here tonight because silence has gone on too long. Because a good man's name is being dragged through mud, and we won't stand for it. From the crowd's edge, old Martha Henley shuffled forward, leaning heavy on her walker. That man fixed my brakes last winter. Wouldn't take a dime. Said my husband served in Korea. That was payment enough. He knew my granddaughter's car wasn't safe. Called out Jim Torres, voice cracking. Stayed late on a Friday, missed his own daughter's school play to fix it. Told me family keeps family safe. More voices rose, overlapping like hymn harmonies. Stories of brake lines checked for free, oil changes that mysteriously cost nothing, a mechanic who saw past pride to need. The choir members started humming Amazing Grace, soft as breath, while testimonies continued. Nora stood clutching David's letter, her hands trembling not from cold, but from the weight of finally speaking truth aloud. When Ruth nodded to her, she stepped into the circle of light. My husband David served in the 80th Airborne. When he came home, he carried stories he couldn't tell. But he wrote them down. She unfolded the paper, voice steady despite tears tracking down her cheeks. He wrote about a convoy ambush outside Fallujah, about soldiers from the 41 Battalion who risked everything to pull civilians to safety. Sergeant Marcus Alvarez led that rescue. The crowd stirred, heads turning toward the boarded garage. I was too afraid to open David's memory box until last week, too afraid of the grief waiting inside. But Mac, her voice caught. Mac fixed my brakes for free when they failed, wouldn't take payment. And when I saw his bronze star tucked in that toolbox like it was nothing special, I knew. Some people hide their light because they think it might blind others. But darkness wins when good people stay quiet. Behind the plywood covering the garage window, Mac pressed his eye to a crack between boards. Lila stood on a milk crate beside him, peering through her own gap. "Daddy, look at all those people." He pulled her close, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. Outside, Hank Perdue stepped forward, his Vietnam veteran cap catching the light. The retired sheriff cleared his throat, Adam's apple working. "I've got something to say. Should have said it years ago." He faced the crowd, shoulders squared like he was testifying in court. "When I was sheriff, I looked the other way. When certain business owners got warnings instead of fines, when code violations got lost in paperwork, I knew. Told myself I was keeping the peace. But peace built on lies ain't peace at all." Murmurs rippled through the gathering. Hank continued, louder now. "Selective enforcement, that's the polite term. Truth is, we've had two sets of rules in this town. One for folks like Clive Harmon, another for everyone else. And I was part of it. Not proud of that. But I'm done being silent." Someone shouted, "About time." Others nodded, anger mixing with validation. The choir's humming swelled into full song, voices lifting amazing grace into the night sky. Candles swayed like fireflies, their light reflecting off car windshields and wet cheeks. Rhea Patel moved through the crowd, phone recording, streaming live to anyone watching. Inside the garage, Max sank onto a workbench, Lila crawling into his lap. "Why are they doing this, Daddy?" "Because," he stopped, searching for words a 10-year-old could hold. "Because sometimes people stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Like you did? In the army? Different kind of brave, baby. This kind, speaking truth when everyone's listening. This might be harder." Through the crack, he watched Nora raise her candle high, the flame steady despite the wind. Other candles rose to meet it, points of light multiplying like stars emerging after storm clouds pass. Ruth's voice carried once more, "We're not leaving. Not until this town remembers what justice looks like, what community means." "The truth is coming, Mac," Nora whispered, though she stood 50 feet from the boarded windows. Somehow, he heard her anyway. Or maybe just felt it the way you feel, sunrise approaching even with your eyes closed. "Hold on." The vigil continued, songs and stories weaving through the cold air. Inside, Mac held his daughter close, feeling something he'd thought combat had killed. Hope. Not the naive kind, but the scarred variety that knows darkness and chooses light anyway. For the first time in weeks, his spirit lifted. Not soaring, not yet. But rising, like those candles outside, small flames refusing to surrender to the night. The morning after the vigil, Nora's phone buzzed before her coffee finished brewing. Rhea's voice crackled with urgency. "Emergency council meeting tonight, 7 o'clock. Clive pushed it through, wants to address what he's calling public disturbance at Mac's shop." Nora gripped the counter. "He's using the vigil against us?" "Trying to. But listen, I've got 1,200 people watching my stream from last night," comments pouring in. "This isn't just Cedar Ridge anymore. By 6:30, Town hall's parking lot overflowed onto side streets. Folks who hadn't attended a meeting in years filed through the double doors. The small chamber, built for maybe 60 people, held twice that. Bodies lined walls, filled doorways, spilled into the hallway where someone had rigged speakers to carry sound. Mac arrived with Lila clutching his hand. They found seats near the back, Mac's shoulders hunched like he was trying to disappear into himself. Nora caught his eye from across the room. He managed a tight nod. The council president, a thin man named Dale Pritchard, banged his gavel 3 times. The room settled into tense silence. "We're here to address the proposed redevelopment of Block 7, which includes the property at 451 Main Street, currently operating as Mac's Motor and Brake." Dale adjusted his glasses. "And to address certain concerns about the property owner." Clive Harmon rose from his front row seat, navy suit pressed sharp enough to cut. He carried himself to the podium like a prosecutor approaching closing arguments. "Thank you, Dale. Fellow citizens, we stand at a crossroads. Do we cling to the past, to buildings that barely meet code, to businesses that," he paused, pulling out his phone, "whose owners may not be who they claim?" He projected the Facebook post onto the hall's pull-down screen. The blurry photo of Mac's bronze star filled the wall. Comments scrolled beneath. "Stolen valor. Faker. Typical. These are serious allegations. A man claiming military honors, using them to gain sympathy, to avoid accountability for code violations. Is this who we want representing Cedar Ridge?" Mac's jaw worked, but he stayed seated. Lila pressed against his arm. "The revitalization plan offers growth, prosperity, a future our children deserve. Not this." Clive gestured at the screen. "I move we proceed with the redevelopment vote immediately." Murmurs rose like disturbed wasps. Dale raised his gavel, but before he could speak, the hall's rear door opened. A cane tapped against worn linoleum. Step, tap, step, tap. Chaplain Colonel James Whitfield, retired, moved through the crowd with the deliberate pace of someone who'd learned patience in field hospitals. His dress uniform hung loose on his diminished frame, but the rows of ribbons caught every light. "Mr. President, I request permission to address this body." Dale glanced at Clive, who'd gone rigid. "This isn't public comment period. I'm not public, son. I'm evidence." The chaplain reached the podium. Clive stepped aside, looking like he'd swallowed glass. "My name is Colonel James Whitfield, Chaplain Corps, United States Army, retired. 43 years of service." He pulled a document from his jacket. "On March 15, 2003, I personally pinned the Bronze Star on Sergeant Marcus Alvarez, following action during convoy operations outside Fallujah." He unfolded the paper with deliberate care. Citation reads, "For heroic achievement in ground operations against hostile forces. Sergeant Alvarez distinguished himself by exceptionally valorous actions when his convoy came under coordinated ambush. Despite intense enemy fire, Sergeant Alvarez organized defensive positions, administered life-saving aid to wounded civilians, and coordinated extraction of 7 non-combatants from the kill zone. His courage under fire and dedication to protecting innocent life exemplify the finest traditions of military service." The hall held its breath. Whitfield's eyes found Mac. "I remember that day, Sergeant. Remember you carrying that Iraqi child. Couldn't have been older than your daughter there. You ran through fire twice. Second time, shrapnel caught your shoulder. You didn't stop." Nora stood, legs unsteady. Ruth squeezed her hand as she made her way forward. "I have something to add." Her voice barely carried, but the room leaned in. She unfolded David's letter, hands shaking hard enough to blur the words. "My husband David wrote this after coming home. The 41 saved us. When our convoy got hit, we thought we were finished, but Alvarez and his squad came back for us, came back through hell. 7 civilians lived because those men chose courage over safety." Her voice broke. She pressed on. "David never talked about that day, but he wrote it down." wrote that he owed his life to heroes whose names most people would never know. Marcus Alvarez was one of those names. Hank Perdue stood next, heavy boots echoing, "I got something to say too. As sheriff, I enforced codes different depending on who owned what. Mac's shop got cited for violations I ignored elsewhere. That stops now. What we're doing to this man, it's wrong. And we all know it." The crowd erupted, cheers mixed with angry shouts at Clive, who stood frozen at the council table. Rhea held her phone steady, broadcasting everything to her growing audience. Dale banged his gavel repeatedly. "Order! We'll table the redevelopment vote pending further review." Clive's face flushed red, then white. His mouth opened, closed, found no words. At the back of the room, Mac finally lifted his eyes. Tears ran unchecked down his weathered face. Lila wrapped both arms around him, and for once, he didn't try to hide his emotion. Vindication felt like breathing after being underwater, painful and necessary, and overwhelming all at once. The family court waiting room smelled of floor wax and worry. Mac sat on a wooden bench, hands clasped between his knees, watching the clock tick toward 9. Lila pressed against his side, comic book unopened in her lap. "Dad, my stomach feels weird." "Mine too, baby girl." Nora sat across from them, Pastor Ruth beside her. The hallway stretched long and governmental, filled with other families waiting their turn at justice or heartbreak. Through the window, Cedar Ridge looked smaller somehow, like the whole town held its breath. Mac's lawyer, Sandra Chen, rushed through the doors carrying a tablet and a thick folder. "Good. You're all here. Judge Morrison wants to see us now." The courtroom was smaller than Mac expected. No jury box, no gallery, just a raised bench, 2 tables, and a handful of chairs. Judge Morrison, a black woman with silver streaking her close-cropped hair, reviewed papers while they filed in. The opposing lawyer, a thin man who kept adjusting his tie, stood immediately. "Your Honor, we're here regarding the safety complaint filed against Mr. Alvarez. Multiple concerns about chemical exposure, unstable environment, lack of proper supervision. I've read the complaint, Mr. Garrison." Judge Morrison's voice carried the weight of someone who'd heard every excuse, every angle. "I've also seen some interesting footage from last night's town council meeting, but let's proceed with testimony." Garrison called his first witness the anonymous complainant's representative, a nervous woman who read from prepared notes about observed safety violations and concerning associations. Sandra Chen dismantled her in 3 questions. Had she ever been to Mac's shop? No. Met Lila? No. Witnessed any actual danger? Well, no, but no further questions. Chen called her witnesses. Mrs. Henderson, Lila's 4th-grade teacher, walked forward with the careful dignity of someone who'd shaped young minds for 30 years. Lila Alvarez is exceptional. Top of her class in reading, helps struggling classmates, never misses homework. Her father attends every conference, every school play. When our class needed a field trip chaperone, Mr. Alvarez took a day off work. Not many single fathers do that. She fixed Garrison with a look that could silence a cafeteria. That girl is loved, protected, and thriving. Anyone saying otherwise hasn't been paying attention. Pastor Ruth testified next, voice ringing clear. I've watched Marcus Alvarez raise his daughter with more grace than most 2-parent households manage. He's taught her kindness, service, faith. The shop? That's not danger, that's education. Lila knows how to check tire pressure, change oil, help others. Those are life skills. The parade continued. Mr. Kim from the convenience store, 3 seniors from the vigil. Each painted the same picture: a devoted father, a safe environment, a child flourishing despite challenges. Then Chen pulled out her tablet. Your Honor, I'd like to submit last night's council meeting stream as evidence, specifically the testimony of Colonel Whitfield regarding Mr. Alvarez's military service. Judge Morrison nodded. I watched it live, actually. My husband sent me the link. Quite compelling. Garrison shifted in his seat. Chen continued. The timing of these complaints immediately following Mr. Alvarez's resistance to redevelopment pressure suggests harassment, not genuine concern. We have documentation of code enforcement disparities, evidence of coordinated social media attacks, and now, this custody challenge. It's a pattern of intimidation. Judge Morrison set down her pen. The room held its breath. Mr. Alvarez, stand please. Mac rose, shoulders square but hands trembling slightly. I've reviewed extensive documentation, school records showing Lila's excellent academic performance, character statements from 19 community members, video evidence of widespread community support, and most tellingly, the complete absence of any prior concerns from mandatory reporters, teachers, doctors, counselors who are legally required to report suspected neglect or abuse. She leaned forward. What I see is a coordinated attempt to destroy a man who refused to be pushed out. The complaints filed against you are not just baseless, they're malicious. Using child services as a weapon is reprehensible. Garrison started to object, but Morrison's raised hand silenced him. I'm dismissing all complaints with prejudice. They cannot be refiled. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for investigation of harassment and filing false reports. She looked directly at Mac. Mr. Alvarez, your daughter is lucky to have you. This court recognizes and honors your service both to our country and to our community. Case dismissed. The gavel came down like thunder. Lila launched herself into Mac's arms. He caught her, lifted her, held her like she might disappear if he let go. His shoulders shook, not with fear this time, but release. We're safe now, baby girl, he whispered into her hair. We're safe. The courtroom doors opened to reveal a hallway packed with townspeople. News traveled fast in Cedar Ridge. As Mac emerged carrying Lila, applause erupted. Mrs. Chen from the flower shop, Jorge from the hardware store, parents from Lila's school, even some who'd whispered behind his back now, clapped with genuine warmth. Nora stood by the wall, tears streaming freely. When Mac's eyes found hers over the crowd, he mouthed 2 words. Thank you. She shook her head, pointed at the crowd, then back at him. This wasn't her victory alone. It belonged to Cedar Ridge, to everyone who'd chosen courage over comfort. Outside, morning sun broke through clouds that had threatened rain. Lila squinted up at her father. Dad, can we open the shop now? Yeah, baby, we can open the shop. Good, we've got brakes to fix. The crowd laughed, surrounding them with the warmth of community reclaimed. Cedar Ridge had remembered its heart. The morning paper hit doorsteps before sunrise, but by 7 o'clock, half of Cedar Ridge had already heard the news through the more efficient small-town telegraph of phone calls and coffee shop gossip. Dee Briggs had resigned, effective immediately. Rhea Patel's blog post went live at 7:30, sending ripples through breakfast tables across town. The headline pulled no punches. Inspector admits to pressure from councilmen in targeting local businesses. She'd interviewed Dee at her home the night before, finding a woman exhausted by compromise. I needed the job, Dee had told her, staring into cold coffee. Clive got me hired, said I owed him. Started small delay this permit, flagged that violation. But Mac's shop? That was different. That was wrong. The article laid bare the whole scheme, properties marked for mysterious violations, business owners pressured to sell, cheap, Clive's development company waiting to sweep in. A pattern stretching back 3 years, with Mac's shop as the crown jewel prime corner lot, perfect for luxury condos. At the hardware store, Hank Perdue held court by the key-cutting machine, surrounded by morning regulars. Got file boxes in my basement, he said, voice carrying across the paint aisle. 20 years of records from my time as sheriff. Every complaint, every inspection, every citation, patterns clear as day. Word traveled fast. By 9 o'clock, Clive Harmon had canceled his scheduled radio interview. By 10, his office phone had been disconnected. At Mac's Motor, ATT, break, different sounds filled the morning. The crack of prying boards loose, the scrape of hammers pulling nails, Mac worked methodically, removing plywood from window frames while neighbors gathered with supplies. Jorge from the hardware store arrived first, truck bed full of primer and paint. "On the house?" he said, refusing Mac's protests. "You fixed my mother's van last winter. Wouldn't take payment. This is how it works." Mrs. Chen brought brushes and rollers from her husband's construction company. The Brennan brothers showed up with ladders. Someone had started a group text, "Help Mac Day," and responses poured in. Nora arrived with coolers of lemonade and sandwiches, tying her hair back with the efficiency of someone ready to work. She grabbed a brush without asking, started on the window trim. Yellow paint speckled her cheek within minutes. "You don't have to," Mac started. "Hush, hand me that rag." They painted in companionable rhythm. Neighbors took turns, creating a rotating crew that kept brushes moving all morning. Stories emerged between brush strokes. The time Mac had opened early to fix the church van before Sunday service. The winter he'd quietly paid for new tires for a struggling single mom. Small kindnesses remembered, now returned. Lila darted between helpers, sketching in her notebook. "I'm designing it," she announced to anyone who'd listen. "The Hero's Wall. Right there on the side of the building. Regular people doing brave things." Around noon, a news van pulled up. Not Rhea this time. The regional station had picked up the story. They interviewed painters, captured the scene of community in action. Max stayed in the background, uncomfortable with cameras, but the story told itself through the crowd. Pastor Ruth arrived with the church youth group, teenagers armed with paint rollers and energy. They attacked the back wall with enthusiasm, if not precision. Music played from someone's speaker, old gospel mixed with classic rock. The garage transformed from a place of siege to celebration. By late afternoon, fresh white paint gleamed on 3 walls. The fourth waited for Lila's mural. She'd convinced the crowd to leave it blank, ready for her heroes. The garage sign got touched up, letters bold and clear. Max Motor, brake serving Cedar Ridge, since 2014. As shadows lengthened, the crowd thinned. Families headed home for dinner. Teenagers disappeared to evening plans. Finally, just Nora, Mac, and Lila remained, surveying their work. "Pizza?" Nora suggested. "My treat." They sat on milk crates in the garage bay, box open between them, grease-stained napkins piling up. Lila chattered about her mural plans, firefighters, teachers, mechanics, librarians. "Real heroes don't always wear capes," she said, then grinned. "But I might add capes anyway." Mac laughed. Not a chuckle or a polite smile, but a real laugh that came from deep in his chest. The sound surprised him, like a muscle remembering how to work after too long idle. "What?" Lila asked, delighted by her father's reaction. "Nothing, baby. Just happy." They cleaned up as sunset painted the shop golden. The 3 of them stood outside, watching light play across fresh paint. Down Main Street, other shops were closing for the evening. Normal sounds of a small town winding down. But something had shifted in the rhythm. People waved as they passed. Horns honked in greeting, not complaint. "Town feels different," Max said quietly. Nora nodded. "It's remembering what it used to be, what it could be again." Lila tugged at her father's hand. "Can I start the mural tomorrow?" "Sure, baby. We'll get paint first thing. Real artist paint? Not house paint?" "Real artist paint." They stood together as stars began appearing overhead. The shop that had been threatened now stood renewed. The family that had been targeted now stood supported. The town that had been divided was finding its way back together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Clive hadn't disappeared. The development pressure remained. But tonight, watching sunset fade to dusk, they had this: fresh paint, full stomachs, and the quiet promise of mornings yet to come. A week later, morning light caught the fresh paint on the garage's east wall. Lila's mural blazed with color mechanics in purple capes tightening lug nuts, grandmothers gripping steering wheels like warriors, children holding wrenches high as swords. Every figure looked forward, toward something better. "Ready?" Nora asked, adjusting the banner stretched across the bay doors. Hearts, brakes grand opening free safety checks today. Mac nodded, though his hands betrayed nerves, smoothing his clean work shirt for the third time. Still can't believe we're doing this. Believe it. Pastor Ruth approached with her worn Bible and a smile. The paperwork's filed, the board's assembled, and half the town's waiting to celebrate. The board consisted of unlikely allies: Nora as director, Hank handling security and compliance, Jorge managing parts donations, Mrs. Chen coordinating volunteers. Even Rhea had claimed a role, promising to document every story of lives changed by brake pads and kindness. "Gather round," Pastor Ruth called. The small crowd formed a circle: volunteers, neighbors, curious onlookers. The choir from First Methodist assembled on the sidewalk, hymnals ready. Pastor Ruth's prayer was brief but powerful. "Lord, bless this work of hands and hearts. Let this shop be a place where dignity is restored along with brake lines, where no one drives unsafe because they can't afford repairs. Let it stand as testimony that communities are built one act of service at a time." Amen rippled through the crowd. The choir launched into "This Little Light of Mine," voices carrying down Main Street. Passing cars slowed, windows rolling down to listen. Some pulled over, joining the gathering crowd. Mac cut the ribbon with oversized scissors Lila had decorated with glitter. Applause erupted. Within minutes, the first car rolled in, Mrs. Patterson's ancient Corolla, held together by rust and prayer. "Free brake inspection, ma'am," Mac said, professional and warm. "Coffee's hot if you'd like to wait inside." The system they'd developed was simple but effective. Volunteers checked people in, recorded basic information, offered refreshments. Mac and two veteran friends he'd recruited handled inspections. Minor fixes were completed immediately. Major issues got documented for future repair days, parts ordered through Jorge's wholesale connections. By noon, 15 cars had been inspected. 3 needed new brake pads, installed on the spot. 1 required a full-line replacement, scheduled for next week when parts arrived. Every customer left with a safety report and, more importantly, dignity intact. "This is beautiful," Rhea said, interviewing Mrs. Patterson. "Tell me what this means to you." "Means I can drive to my doctor without worrying I'll hurt someone," the elderly woman replied. "Means I matter, even though my Social Security barely covers groceries." Rhea's live stream drew viewers from 3 counties. Comments flooded in donations, volunteer offers, stories of similar programs people wanted to start. The movement was spreading beyond Cedar Ridge. Lila worked the crowd like a tiny CEO, explaining her mural to anyone who'd listen. "That's Mr. Garcia," she pointed to a caped figure. "He fixed our neighbor's car for free. And that's Miss Betty. She drove meals to shut-ins until her car broke down. Now she can drive again." Each painted figure had a real story, an actual person whose kindness had touched the community. The mural wasn't fantasy, it was testimony rendered in acrylic. Hank manned a folding table, helping people fill out intake forms with patience earned through decades of public service. "No rush," he told a nervous young mother. "We're here every Saturday now. You're safe." The young woman's eyes filled with tears. Her brake warning light had been on for months, but choosing between repairs and baby formula was no choice at all. Today, she didn't have to choose. As afternoon stretched toward evening, the crowd evolved from customers to community. Someone brought cookies. The taco truck parked nearby, offering free lunch to volunteers. Kids played in the small grass strip beside the shop, while parents waited for inspections. Nora found herself standing before the mural, studying Lila's work. One figure stood out, a librarian with wings made of book pages, holding a wrench in one hand and a steering wheel in the other. The face was kind, lined with gentle wrinkles. It looked like her. Tears came without warning, streaming down her cheeks. David would have loved this. His belief in service, his quiet insistence that ordinary people could do extraordinary things, it lived here in fresh paint and brake dust. "You okay?" Mac appeared beside her, concern creasing his forehead. More than okay. She wiped her eyes, laughing at herself. Your daughter made me a superhero. You are one. His voice was matter of fact. To us, anyway. The sun began its descent, painting everything golden. The crowd gradually dispersed, carrying stories of the day back to their neighborhoods. Volunteers packed up tables and chairs. The choir sang one last hymn before heading home. Finally, just the core group remained: Mac, Nora, Lila, Pastor Ruth, Hank, and Rhea. They stood in a loose circle, exhausted but exhilarated. 23 cars inspected, Hank reported. 12 repairs completed. 0 accidents prevented, we'll never know how many. It's a good start, Pastor Ruth said. A very good start. As others drifted away, Mac caught Nora's elbow gently. Can we talk? They walked to the side of the building, where Lila's mural caught the last rays of sunlight. Mac struggled for words, starting and stopping twice before finally speaking. You gave us more than breaks. His voice was thick with emotion. You gave us back a future. Lila and me, we were just surviving. Now we're part of something. You were always part of something, Nora replied. The town just forgot for a while. We all did. They stood together, watching shadows lengthen across the mural. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More cars, more stories. But tonight, hope had taken root in fresh paint and motor oil, growing into something neither of them could have imagined. The future stretched ahead, bright as Lila's painted heroes, solid as properly working brakes. 3 weeks after the Hearts, Evans, brakes launch, evening rain drummed against the garage roof. Mac worked late, adjusting the timing belt on Mrs. Chen's Honda, while Lila did homework at her makeshift desk, an old door laid across sawhorses that Nora had helped them refinish. The bell above the door chimed. Nora stepped inside, shaking droplets from her umbrella, carrying something wrapped in a quilted blanket. You're out late, Mac said, sliding out from under the Honda. Had to wait for the wood stain to dry. She set the bundle on the workbench with careful hands. I made something for you. Lila looked up from her math problems, curiosity pulling her across the shop. What is it? Nora unwrapped the blanket, revealing a wooden shadow box. Cherry wood, hand-sanded smooth, with brass hinges that caught the overhead lights. Inside, royal blue velvet lined every surface. A small brass plate on the front read, Sergeant Marcus Alvarez, Honor and Service. Mac wiped his hands on a shop rag, approaching slowly. Nora, I can't. Open it fully. She lifted the lid, showing the interior. Perfect compartments for the bronze star, its ribbon, and the citation. A smaller space waited for unit patches. Everything measured precisely, cut to cradle each piece of his service. This must have taken weeks, he said. 3, actually. Hank helped with the woodworking. He knows his way around a router. She ran her fingers along the smooth edges. Pastor Ruth contributed the velvet from her grandmother's jewelry box, said it needed a better purpose. Lila traced the brass plate with one finger. It's beautiful. Mac's jaw worked silently. He walked to his battered toolbox, lifting the top tray where the bronze star had lived for years between wrenches and screwdrivers. The metal looked small in his calloused palm, its ribbon frayed at the edges. I don't want it on a mantel, he said quietly. Don't want it behind glass where people stare at it like I'm some kind of, then don't put it there. Nora lifted the shadow box, carrying it to his toolbox. She nestled it into the lower compartment, between his socket set and torque wrenches. Keep it where you work. Honor belongs where it was earned. The box fit perfectly, as if the toolbox had been waiting for it all along. The overhead light caught the brass plate, making it gleam among the honest tools of his trade. Mac placed the metal inside the shadow box with reverent care. The velvet cradled it like it was precious, which it was, though not in the way most people thought. Not for glory or recognition, but for the lives saved, the promises kept, the nights he'd stayed awake, so others could sleep. His hand lingered on the metal, fingers trembling slightly. The citation went in next, folded with military precision. Then the unit patch, worn soft from years in his pocket. "Dad?" Lila's voice was small. "You okay?" He turned to find her holding her tablet, the camera app open. "Yeah, baby girl, I'm good." "Can I?" She gestured with the tablet. "For my hero collection?" He nodded, unable to speak. Lila raised the tablet, framing the shot carefully. The image she captured would later become her favorite, her father's weathered hand resting on the metal in its new home, surrounded by tools that served others daily. Light and shadow played across the scene, making something sacred out of the ordinary moment. "Ordinary hero," she whispered, lowering the tablet. Mac laughed softly, the sound mixing with tears he didn't try to hide. He pulled Lila close, her head fitting perfectly under his chin. "Come here, you." Nora watched them, her own eyes wet. This was what she'd hoped for when she'd started the project. Not just a place for the medal, but a way to honor both parts of Mac the soldier he'd been and the mechanic he'd become. Both versions serving others, both versions matter. "I'll make cocoa," she said, moving toward the small hot plate Mac kept for coffee. "Top shelf, behind the oil filters," Mac called out, still holding Lila. "The good stuff with marshmallows." They settled on folding chairs around the workbench, mugs warming their hands while rain intensified outside. The garage felt like a sanctuary, tools hung in neat rows. The Hearts, Brakes banner stretched across one wall, Lila's mural visible through the window. "Tell me about the night you earned it," Lila said suddenly. The real story. Mac had always deflected before, but tonight felt different. The shadow box had changed something, made the past speakable. "It was raining," he began. "Like tonight, but harder. Mortar fire had separated a medical convoy from its escort." He told the story simply, without drama or flourish. 3 hours pinned down. 4 civilians pulled from a burning vehicle. His squad mate Torres, who didn't make it home. The chaplain, who prayed over them in the mud while they waited for dawn. Lila listened with the attention she usually reserved for her favorite books. Nora heard echoes of her husband's letters in Mac's words, the same understated courage, the same focus on others rather than self. "Were you scared?" Lila asked. "Every second." Mac sipped his cocoa. "Being brave doesn't mean not feeling scared. Means doing what needs doing anyway." Thunder rolled overhead, making the lights flicker. They sat in comfortable silence, 3 generations bound by more than blood, by choice, by struggle, by grace discovered in unexpected places. The shadow box caught the light from its new home in the toolbox, brass and velvet, among steel and iron. Tomorrow it would witness oil changes and brake jobs, ordinary service continuing what began in a desert years ago. Rain tapped gentle rhythms on the roof, blessing their small circle of light against the darkness. The church bells sang across Cedar Ridge, their bronze voices carrying through air so clear it seemed scrubbed clean by last night's rain. Nora walked down Main Street between Mac and Lila, their shadows stretching long in the morning sun. Her sensible heels clicked against sidewalk that sparkled with leftover moisture, each step steady and sure. A horn honked, gentle, friendly. "Mrs. Patterson waved from her Oldsmobile, the one Mac had serviced just yesterday. Her brake lights glowed evenly as she slowed for the stop sign. "Morning," she called through her open window, running smooth as butter. Another honk, then another. Tom Bradley and his pickup, the Hendricks family in their minivan, old Samuel Hayes in the Cadillac he'd owned since 1987. Each vehicle moved with confidence, brakes tested, fluids topped, safety assured by calloused hands that cared. "Look!" Lila tugged at her father's sleeve, pointing at the mural. A cluster of children stood before it, their parents reading the painted words aloud. "Ordinary heroes live here." One little boy traced the outline of a caped mechanic with his finger, wonder bright in his eyes. "That's my dad," Lila told them proudly. "He painted him." The boy's mother looked up at Mac, recognition dawning. "You're the one who fixed my mother's car last month. Wouldn't take payment." Mac shifted, uncomfortable with praise as always. Just doing what needed doing. They climbed the church steps together, wood worn smooth by generations of faithful feet. Inside, sunlight streamed through stained glass, painting rainbows across worn pews. The sanctuary filled steadily faces Nora had known for decades mixed with newer ones, drawn by recent events that had shaken and then strengthened the town. Pastor Ruth stood at the pulpit, her silver hair catching the colored light. She nodded as they entered, that knowing smile that said she'd been expecting them. They slid into a pew halfway down, Mac on the aisle, Lila in the middle, Nora on the far side. The arrangement felt natural, like pieces of a puzzle finding their places. Lila's hand found her father's, her other hand reaching for Nora's hymnal to share. "Good morning, church," Pastor Ruth began, her voice carrying without strain. "This morning, I want to talk about courage." The congregation settled, attentive. Not the courage of grand gestures or spotlight moments. I mean the courage of showing up, of fixing brakes for free when your own bills are due, of standing beside someone when the whole town whispers, of opening a box of memories when grief still cuts deep. Nora felt tears prick her eyes. Beside her, something shifted not physically, but spiritually. The empty space where David used to sit didn't feel empty anymore. His presence lingered differently now, not as an absence, but as a gentle blessing. "Well done," she could almost hear him say. "This is exactly where you should be." Compassion, Pastor Ruth continued, isn't just feeling sorry for someone. It's getting your hands dirty in their struggle. It's baking pies and painting walls and showing up at town meetings when you'd rather stay home. Hank nodded from his usual spot near the back. Rhea typed notes on her phone, already composing her next article about the town's transformation. And community, real community, happens when ordinary people choose extraordinary love. When mechanics become healers. When widows become warriors. When children remind us what heroes really look like. Lila straightened, recognizing herself in the words. The sermon flowed into hymns, voices lifting in harmony. Mac's baritone surprised Nora. She hadn't known he could sing. The sound wrapped around her soprano and Lila's eager attempts to follow along, creating something new from separate parts. After the benediction, they filed out slowly, stopping for handshakes and hugs. The town square beyond the church buzzed with unusual activity. For a Sunday, the old Woolworth building had a "Coming Soon" community cafe sign. The empty lot beside the pharmacy showed fresh plantings. Someone was starting a garden. "It's different," Max said quietly, surveying the scene. "The whole town feels different." "Towns are like people," Nora replied. "Sometimes they need a crisis to remember who they're supposed to be." He turned to her then, those dark eyes holding depths of gratitude that words couldn't capture. Everything he couldn't say lived in that look. Thanks for believing him, for fighting beside him, for showing him that accepting help wasn't weakness, but wisdom. She answered with a small nod that carried its own message. "We made it. Together. Can we get ice cream?" Lila asked, bouncing on her toes. "It's not even noon," Mac protested, but his smile undermined any sternness. "Special occasions call for special rules," Nora said. "And I'd say saving the town counts." They walked toward the shop, but Mac stopped. "Actually, I need to check something at the garage." Just remembered Mrs. Chen is picking up her Toyota this afternoon. "On Sunday?" Nora asked. "She works doubles all week. Sunday's the only day she can come." He ruffled Lila's hair. "You two go ahead. Get me butter pecan?" Lila's face lit up. "Can I ride with Miss Nora?" "If she doesn't mind." "I'd love the company," Nora said. They parted at the corner, Mac heading toward the garage, Nora and Lila toward her Buick. The car started smoothly, brakes responding perfectly as she backed out. Lila scrambled into the passenger seat, chattering about which flavors to try. Through the rearview mirror, Nora saw Mac at the garage bay, tools already in hand despite his Sunday clothes. He looked up, caught her watching, and waved. The gesture held promise of more Sundays, more shared meals, more quiet moments when three separate people felt like family. The church bells rang the hour, bronze voices echoing off buildings old and new, carrying their message through Cedar Ridge. Redemption was possible, community could heal, and sometimes the best stories began with broken breaks and borrowed courage. If you enjoyed the story, I hand-picked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.